My name is Marissa Rathbone, and I am your Director of Strategic Advocacy with the Washington State School Directors Association. I'm just about to start my 5th year in this role. So I have 2 pandemic legislative session years and 2 non-pandemic legislative session years. Maybe we'll call those regular. So have a nice background and perspective on how the legislature works and sometimes doesn't. But I'm here to share some insights as well as learn from you and give you all an opportunity to share some things with one another. I developed a PowerPoint presentation, which I hope kind of captures some of the things I think are most timely for you to know, but I also want to invite you to ask questions in the chat at any point in time. And then there might be some opportunities also as we engage in some Q&A for you to share some things out loud. So would love for your participation at those times if you're in a place to do so. I see just a few more folks joined since I started the intro. Liza Rankin from Seattle is here. Hi, Liza. And then I think someone by the name of Deb just joined. Deb, if you wouldn't mind letting us know what school district you're from, that would be lovely. And I see Sherry joined as well. Sherry, remind me what school district you join us from.
Coopville.
Coopville, great. Love it.
And I'm from Mercer Island.
Mercer Island, great. What a nice potpourri of attendees tonight. Again, thanks for being here on a sunny spring, almost summer evening to learn a little bit about the interim and what you can be doing as a ledge rep or another school board member to help elevate your district's positions and priorities, as well as continue on the advocacy train with WSSDA and fellow school board members. So I'm going to go ahead and pop up the presentation. Again, like I said, please feel free to ask questions throughout. And any of the materials that I share on these presentations are for you to take and run with so that you can use them to share information with your fellow school board members as well. So interim advocacy, just going to make sure everybody's muted. Hold on one second. There we go. Great. Okay. So a couple things I'm hoping to cover, just a reminder about the importance of this time in between legislative sessions in terms of advocating for your district and community and students and staff. Share some resources with you, some of which are new and emerging, and then give you a little bit of a look ahead, some things to anticipate, both during the interim and upcoming with the 2024 legislative session, which, yes, isn't 7 months away, but it's good to start talking about it now. So just a little bit, interim can mean a lot of things, but for the purposes of our conversations and what we continuously talk about, interim to us means the time in between legislative sessions. So legislative session ended April 24th, and the next one will begin January 8th. So we are in a very critical time right now that we call interim. This is the time truly when legislators are already thinking about and deciding their legislative priorities. So if we're waiting to have a conversation until the legislative session has started, we are absolutely too late to help shape what legislators might be considering for bills and other initiatives that they care about. This is really the most important time for advocacy year-round. It's also a time for you and your fellow school directors to be reflecting about what helped you in the last legislative session, where things didn't go far enough, and then maybe where there were no discussions at all, and you need to re-elevate a priority issue with WSSDA so that we can advocate on your collective behalf, so long as we have a position to support it, and also with your legislators. And this is also a great time to be engaging in community and legislator conversations to build some connections that have the benefit of being really informal and outside of a legislative session, so they can be a dialogue as opposed to sort of reactionary or a sense of urgency. And I do think someone has their microphone open. So if you wouldn't mind muting that just for the benefit of everyone's hearing, that would be lovely. Thank you so much. So many of you are familiar with this graphic. And so I will tell you yet again that advocacy does happen year round. And I think one of the most telling parts of this graphic, which was created by WSSDA to help school board members really understand from the WSSDA perspective at a very high level, kind of what's going on in these 1 to 2 month timeframes. And what I want to draw specific attention to is that the legislative session in and of itself is a very, very small piece of the total advocacy pie. And this upcoming session, it will only be 60 days. We just got done with a 105-day session. I'll talk more about the implications for that later. But if you just look at this whole circle, if you think about the year as a piece of pie, only a very small part of it actually is during a legislative session. So the way to influence is by doing work now. And if you look at this graphic, late March to May, as well as May to July, we just got done with the period of time when school boards had the opportunity to submit position proposals through the WSSDA position platform window. As a result of that opportunity, we received approximately 40 submissions from school districts across the state. However, some of those were duplicates. So it is clear that some school districts worked in cooperation with other school districts to submit the exact same position. So we ended up with just 30 position proposals in total, all of which will come to General Assembly for consideration by the body. Those positions are currently being considered by the Legislative and Resolutions Committee, who will review the positions against the current platforms and determine whether or not they give a do pass or a do not pass recommendation. That will be reflected in the handbook. That is your best tool for preparing for the General Assembly in September. However, just as a note, those just are recommendations, and the body will vote how the body will vote based on the voting delegates in attendance. So we'll talk a little bit more about what you could be doing right now, as this is particularly focused on what WSSDA committees are doing. There's ways for you to be continuing to advocate for your own interests during this time as well. A couple ideas for you as a legislative rep. Some of you are very seasoned at this role and have lots of recommendations and advice to share. I'm hoping to give an opportunity for you to share some of those here in a moment. And others of you are brand new to this role and are still learning the ropes, and that is perfectly fine. Welcome. We're happy you're here. This really is a learning community for us to share things that are working, haven't worked, because both things are very informative for the future. So one thing that we have recommended pretty consistently for you all is to have a standing section on your regular school board meeting agendas. And some school districts do that for every meeting, every other week. And some do that just for a monthly regular meeting. So they're only providing one ledge rep report each month throughout the course of the year. There's nothing that's required for you to do in this regard. So it's really what works best for you and your fellow school board members. But even if you just had a 10-minute report, at least once a month, you can use the information that we provide during these monthly meetings, basically just to share back to your board. So we're not asking you to reinvent anything or make anything up, but it's important that you get an opportunity to both share information and learn from your board what's most pressing for the legislative session ahead. So that's what I said by sharing the monthly Ledge Rep Network presentation. I'll always have a presentation or a document for you to take with you, and that can definitely be shared with your fellow school board members. If you don't have something to share, you can just have a very informal conversation about what most specifically you're interested in bringing forward to the legislative session, which can also help you to prepare for the General Assembly coming up. Your voting delegate for your school board will have the opportunity to represent your board and vote on the position proposals that come forward. In addition, following General Assembly, you'll have the opportunity to prioritize any of the adopted member legislative positions. So those could be newly adopted or previously adopted by the body legislative positions for prioritization. Those priorities help to inform our advocacy efforts moving into the legislative session. And we create a communications tool for legislators that help reflect that prioritization process. We'll give you more information on that to come, but happy to answer questions as we go. I see there might be a question in the chat. Okay, Larry was just letting us know that he's driving and listening. That's perfectly fine. We're happy to have you here any way we can have you, as so long as you're safe. That's the most important thing. And then also you could be talking even now already about who your school board delegate will be for General Assembly. And essentially what that means, if you've never participated in General Assembly before, is that each school board identifies a voting delegate who will vote on behalf of their board at the General Assembly, where WSSDA's position platform is voted upon by members. You could end up having more than one voting delegate representing your board at different times, but for any one position proposal, you can only have one voting delegate voting on behalf of your district during that period of time. Please feel free to ask me questions if you have any about that or anything else. And then probably the most important thing that you as a leg rep or any school board member could be doing is to be reaching out to your legislators and meeting with them right now. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that might look like in a moment. But those are two very hopefully seemingly easy things for you to be doing right now that take additional time outside of your school board role. And there are lots of different ways that you can go about doing this work, and hope we get a chance to share a little bit about what that might look like. So on that note, I'm curious if anybody could share out loud with the group or type into the chat, if you have a standing leg rep report. Do you do that monthly? Do you do it every 2 weeks? What's the content like? And what kinds of conversations do you engage your fellow school board members as a part of that? So I would love, 2 or 3 of you to just share some of the things that have worked for you. And if any of you have kind of an agenda or outline handy to share with the group, feel free to upload it into chat or share it with me via email, and I can share it out to the rest of the group. Anybody willing to share a little bit about how they do this with their board?
I can.
Great. Tell me who you are.
Hi, it's Liza Rankin
Hi,
from Seattle. Hello. We have a part in our regular legislative board meetings where we give committee updates or liaison updates. So it usually happens before we move into any voting or any kind of other board business. And so throughout the session, I usually use that time to just let my fellow board directors know what of our supported issues or positions were moving, any activity that I may have done that week, what I testified on, what other representatives from Seattle School District staff or our lobbyists testified on, and then if bills have advanced or not. I also tended to give them weekly or bi-weekly updates by email, just kind of dump a bunch of stuff into a document and send it to them, and then offer a version of that for my verbal updates in school board meetings. I use that time also to signal in advance of when I would be asking for their input on our legislative positions, any kind of process having to do with WSSDA. I will say, and for example, I submitted some positions on behalf of our board. And so I used that time to say, WSSDA positions submissions are due at this time. This is what this means, and lots and lots of reminders of things what we talked about. Last time we talked about this, here's what happened with that. Upcoming is this. Because it's a lot to follow, and it's a lot for people to follow who are not already comfortable or familiar with the whole legislative process, both at the state level and just the submitting WSSDA positions and things. So I try to use that as an opportunity to explain a little bit, kind of remind my fellow board directors what it is I'm doing, and then also explain to anybody who might be listening, what this means, why I'm asking for it, and you know, when or if we'll be taking a vote on something like our positions. You know, I talked about them in various meetings, and then they were introduced in a regular board meeting and voted on.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
Thanks, Liza. Can I ask about how long you take during an agenda? And is that just one time a month, only during ledge session?
It depends. I can talk for a very long time, but I try not to. I think there was one, I actually timed myself, or I looked back at old videos to just see, so I was sort of doing self-evaluation on time use. And there was one update that I gave that was 14 minutes. That was long, but I was doing a lot of sort of background on, I can't even remember what it was, but I was kind of providing a timeline of a series of different things and explaining some different policies that we have to explain why we were advocating. I think it was about the multiplier and the cap, actually.
Okay,
yeah,
great.
so I was sort of, you know, using it as an opportunity to explain a lot of that. Generally, I try to keep it like 5 minutes or less, but I have the opportunity at every regular board meeting to provide that.
Great.
So during session, I did it every time.
Yeah.
Now I will probably, you know, either just have a very short update or go to, you know, when I have something to share specific.
Great. Thank you. I would love, thanks, really appreciate all that perspective. As you all can hear, there's no perfect way to do it, and each time can be a little bit different, and that's totally acceptable. Any other different kinds of examples? Yeah, Mary.
Hello, everyone. One of the really nice things that we have going is between the superintendent and his administrative assistant, especially during the legislative session, we're constantly talking back and forth. Do you need time on the work session? Are there any handouts that I can get ready for the rest of my board members? So it's a real collaborative process, and it's a real hands-on, especially during session. We had last week, during our work session, we had time with the lobbyists for the Franklin Pierce School District and a number of the other districts around Pierce County that came and chatted. We did a look back over the session and had an opportunity to ask Charlie several questions and his thoughts about what he sees as potentially coming forward, good or bad or the ugly. But it's a nice collaborative effort. And Marissa, thank you for forwarding the information that you do, because that makes it very easy for me to put together, get it to my fellow board members, our 2 student reps as well, or our 3 student reps. I include them as well, and give them all the highlights and let them know what's going on, what's happening, what's not happening, and things that we maybe need to talk about and how we need to go forward. And I'll be seeing our senator from the 25th district tomorrow morning at a mid-county leadership team meeting. So things are moving, and they just never stay stagnant.
No, for better and for worse. That's absolutely true. Thanks, Mary. That's a great update.
And I would just like to say, with the 60-day session coming up, that is so compressed. And as someone who was a legislative assistant in Olympia for the members, I mean, it's going 90 million miles an hour from start to finish. So this is the time for us to get with those legislators and have those conversations.
Great insights. Thanks, Mary. Really appreciate it. Was anybody else eager to share something? Sherry, let's hear it.
Just real quick, just to kind of piggyback off the last speaker, I found that during ledge session, it was very helpful to collaborate with my superintendent. We would both kind of tag team to present. And so like I would present a little bit higher, like director view, and then he would translate it at more of the leadership, staffing, district staff level view, which really, I feel like that just helped give a much more clear picture of what was important and why it was important at different levels within our school district. So I just, and plus just still being new to being a ledge rep, it just really helped just to kind of have that support. And it was a good learning for me too, to work with someone.
That's great. That's really good insight. Another advantage of you doing even just a brief update during a regular board meeting, which is an open public meeting, is that for community members who want to be in the know about what's progressing as it relates to advocacy efforts for your board and for WSSDA, that's a really great way for you to be sharing that in a really transparent format. It also helps them understand as there are bills that are proposed and you as a district, you as a board are weighing in, WSSDA as an organization representing member adopted positions are weighing in, sort of where you sit in authority with some of those decisions being made at the legislative level, and also where your community members may have an opportunity to engage at the state level as well. So it's really good for that regard as well.
It's definitely slowed. Yeah, it's definitely slowed down for us, but for sure it was busy for legislators, but it was busy for us too. I found like I'm scrambling again to like trying to get ready for this next step in the interim of just kind of changing gears. So it's still a busy time as a ledge rep, I feel.
It is. And while I know that that's stressful, it also pleases me because it shouldn't feel like it's all hands on deck during ledge session and then there's nothing to do during the interim. That tells me that you're staying engaged throughout the year. And right now, like I've said 1,000 times and will 1,000 more, this is the most important time for you to be elevating your priorities. So speaking of which, I'm going to transition over to the slide deck again. I have hyperlinked in here a link to the Washington State Legislature Online website, a way for you to type in your address, whether you're looking to speak just as a citizen of your own community or as a school board member, the address for your district, the legislators that represent you. So you can easily find their contact information by clicking on this link and entering that address information. Some of the very low-hanging fruit things that you can be doing to help build relationship or continue to strengthen existing relationships. Relationships aren't like you didn't have one and now you have one. It's like you didn't have one, maybe you have one, and you can continue to grow it over time. So if you're in the growing mode, all of these things apply as well. Sending a thank you note or a thank you email for the contributions with special education funding, for increasing and allocating funds for IPD for your educators. So that there's things that they didn't do. It's really easy to get stuck on that. There are things that they did do, which I would encourage you to acknowledge them for. They also held back a lot of policy changes so that there isn't as much for you to be changing in terms of policy and practice as there could have been. So some of those bills really slowed down, and sometimes that's an advantage as well. So find something to say thank you for and thank them in any way you can if you haven't done so already. I realize that the school year is coming to a close and things are pretty packed as you plan for graduations, but if you still have an opportunity and they have the availability to attend a graduation or come to your classroom or any other of the special events that are so traditional during this time of year, please get them there. There's nothing, as you know, like being with students and hearing their stories and seeing their successes and hearing their challenges to help shape the hearts and minds of decision makers. So I would encourage you to try to do that before the end of the school year. And if you haven't reached out, you always could plan something for the fall. You come back next year and we got several months before the school year starts where you could do that. And for them, it may even work better for the fall because, they're tired. They got done with a long session and then they had a special session that was short but stressful. So some of them are taking some much needed time off. Anyway, get them out into your buildings because that's really helpful. Right now, you're probably seeing a lot of traffic in your emails if you're already signed up for their general email messages, which I would also encourage you to do. You can do that on their individual websites. I put just a snapshot of one that I just got, I think within the last 24 hours, about an in-person town hall that's going on in Whatcom County. And these are things that you can do. Sometimes they're still hosting those hybrid or virtually. A lot of those are moving now to in-person. It's a great way for you to hear not only what their priority issues are, but what some of the other constituents in their communities are interested in, because education is so critically important. It's obviously their paramount duty to fund and support. However, there are lots of other issues that they're grappling with, and you'll hear some of those things in a town hall. But if you're only able to do one thing during the interim as it relates to engaging with your legislators, it's find a way to meet with them one-on-one. That one-on-one conversation, whether it's over a Zoom or a cup of coffee or tea, whatever caffeinated or non-caffeinated beverage you drink, just would encourage you to find a way to connect with them. It's if you've never done it before, it can be a little nerve-wracking. If you've got a new legislator, or maybe you've worked with a legislator before and you didn't always agree on everything, that's okay. They still represent you. And in some cases, you represent them and their children in your school district. So it's just a relationship that's important for you to continue to build. It can be informal. You don't need to have an agenda. There may be some specific things you want to talk about. It's perfectly fine to say, hey, I really just want to spend a little time with you. I'd love to be able to talk about special education funding while we're there, and also learn a little bit about what your priorities are. But you can always ask them in a moment where you don't know what to say. So besides education issues, what are some of the other things you care about? And they'll have a long list, because they have a lot of constituents sharing concerns with them as well. So if you were to prioritize one thing as it relates to advocacy efforts, is to meet with your senator and your 2 representatives at least once. And if you feel comfortable, and they do too, in person would be lovely during the interim sooner rather than later. I would make that one of your priorities. If you're able to bring one of your other school board members along, maybe your superintendent, make sure you let your superintendent know that you're having these meetings, just as a courtesy. Not that you need permission, but it's helpful because your superintendent might be able to give you some insights that can inform that conversation. Recommend you do so. So I'm curious now, another opportunity for you to share, besides some of the ideas that I've shared already, coffee with a legislator, sending a thank you note. Curious if there's any other types of advocacy work that your board has engaged in the interim that might be nice for other school board members, ledge reps to know as a model. Any other ideas or suggestions? Sherry.
A couple of one is, a lot of our clubs and organizations and programs do fundraising events over the summer. So I'm in District 10. I've already Rep Dave Paul, he's got on his calendar our Cook for a Cause that he's been very faithfully attending every summer, because it's amazing and so wonderful and fun. And I think it's fun it's outdoors. So it's just, something a little bit different. And so he asks about that now. So that's something that he's attending. Definitely, he and I have a little bit more of a relationship over the years, just because of other community connections, which is, a bonus of living in a rural community. So he knows, he's already approached me, which was very, very nice, about meeting for coffee, which I appreciated. But the other interim thing I have to go back and say, Marissa, is that with our last networking hour with Senator Claire Wilson spoke, and she was just like, hey, if you're interested in what, she was looking at reentry for juvenile justice. And so I attended that last networking meeting, and I've been working with my juvenile detention educator. I was like, oh, let me just contact her and just see what she has to say. And the other thing about the interim is that you get more than 15 minutes with your rep. She gave me 55 minutes of her time, and we just ended up talking about so many things. And I did come with like a question or an agenda or an ask of her to see if there was something that she might be able to help me with. And she's like, is there anything I could do for you? Like literally the last 5 minutes of this 55 minutes conversation. I was just like, well, this is something that's kind of, come up in my district. She's like, absolutely. that's, yeah, you send that to me. So, she's in District 30. I mean, we're not even in the same district, but just that collaborate, you never know. So thank you for having her speak, Marissa, because now we have this connection. You just never know.
Yeah, great. I'm so glad that worked out. Yeah, the last LegRep network meeting was just following the legislative session, and we invited the chair, vice chair or vice chairs, and the ranking minority members of both the Senate and the House Education Committee, House and Senate Education Committees, and just Senator Wellman and Senator Wilson were able to accept that invitation. So I think other folks were already hopefully getting some much needed rest and family time. But yeah, it was good to have them there. And we can bring any legislators to these conversations, especially as you are figuring out your priorities and issues. We can bring legislators who are champions for those as well to these conversations. So it's great. Any other interim advocacy strategies that anyone from the group would like to share? I see that Pat said something about the tribal consultation annual meeting. Curious if you wanted to elaborate on that, Pat, at all, or?
Sure. I've been on the board for 9 years. And last year was the first year that the Colville tribes have had any kind of formal consultation process where they got everybody together to meet. The chairman of the Employment and Education Committee went back with us to NAFIS in DC. I don't know if this is particular to the Colville tribe or whether there is a renewed effort on the part of tribal authorities and tribal leaders to take advantage of their role in education more so. This year's meeting, they got it a whole day at tribal headquarters for Omak, Lake Roosevelt, Nispelem, and Chelam, and Keller. So it was pretty good, and I'm glad to see it take place. They are interested in the legislative process and are willing to help. So allies if schools need them.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that feedback, Pat. That's good
Sure.
to hear. Great. So good work going on in the interim. Lots of ideas. I hadn't heard this idea about the events over the summer, inviting legislators to that for part of the K-12 space. So that's great. Thinking about the school year being even in the summertime and opportunities for legislators to connect with students as possible. Even then, cook for a cause. I kind of want to come, Sherry. So let's go ahead and pop back into our presentation. So wanted to share a few resources that either were already in existence and just wanted to refresh your memory, or that are new or emerging to be sure you're on the lookout for, because I know there's lots of things coming at you. So lots of things consistently changing. This is probably familiar if you've been on any one of these networking meetings previously, that we have a one-pager on our webpage, and this webpage is linked here, that basically would be printable and wouldn't just be helpful for you as LegRep, but also to help your fellow school board members also understand what the general role of a legislative representative is. Remember, it's not required that there be a LegRep on the board. It's a good idea and really helps you as a collective membership communicate between one another, and really for WSSDA staff to help have one single body that can help communicate with their school boards, sort of what's going on. So it's really helpful in terms of advocacy, because it's more eyes and ears and hearts on the ground doing the work that you're doing and getting the messages out. We know that LegRep opportunities come up regularly, and some of you volunteered and some of you were voluntold. Either way, if you're new, please submit your updated information to me specifically so that we can be sure our list is updated. I keep that updated and send communications specifically to LegReps, in particular the information that we covered during these meetings. So I know it's an ever-changing contact list. And if you can help me keep it up to date, that would be super helpful. Thank you. Please attend these monthly webinars. You don't have to just be a ledge rep in order to attend. Any school board members can attend, but really hope more and more ledge reps continue to be present. So happy to see and hear from new people tonight. If you haven't already, please subscribe to what we call during session. We call it in session, but we'll also be sending out an interim publication. If you're already a part of in session, you'll get the interim, but if you're not a part of either, please subscribe with this link. During session, we send out a weekly update, what's going on with the legislative session. During interim, we'll send one out at least once a month or as needed. So there might be something timely or pertinent or urgent that comes up. We'll use the in-session interim listserv essentially to send out that notification. Otherwise, it'll just be on an as-needed basis. And we already covered this, but making sure you're scheduling some time on your board's regular agendas is really important. So a couple resources that maybe you haven't seen yet. There's a 2-minute video about what it means to be a legislative rep. I'm not going to play it here tonight, just mostly because audio can be a little spotty trying to play a video during a webinar, but I'd encourage you to watch it. It's inspirational and instructional, and you can share it with others, especially if someone's debating about whether or not they want to be a ledge rep. Hopefully it would encourage them to think positively of the opportunity. The Student Representative Network is also a really important part of our organization. It's come a long way in the last several years. You may have known and still know Logan Endress, who was our previous strategic advocacy specialist. His last day with WSSDA was last week. He's taking a week off and then moving on to a new role with a new organization. But he left with us a very important legacy, which we call the SRN, or the Student Rep Network, which is why we're called the Ledge Rep Network. We're modeled after the same sort of network concept. If you've got student reps who want to join, they can join by clicking on this link and sending their information, which will be routed to me, and they'll be added to a list. There is a video made by student reps here that, again, is sort of inspirational and a little bit instructional about the why and the how behind being a student rep. There's a very comprehensive resource guide about what it means to authentically identify and engage students in a representative role with your school board. This resource guide was created by actual student representatives and in support with WSSDA staff. And then the last thing I want to call your attention to, it hasn't been released yet, but in the upcoming issue of Direct, which will be released in June, there will be a recommendation that came forward from the Student Rep Network this year about how to conduct an advisory vote. So recognizing that student reps can't vote for the record on any board policies or any other official votes that you take, they could have the opportunity to provide an advisory vote on various votes that you take. And there's a way in which you can do that that really honors their voice. And so those recommendations will be laid out in a pretty in-depth article in Direct coming up this summer. So be on the lookout for that. Here is a direct link to sign up for in session, which is also interim. And then if you're an Instagrammer, we do post during legislative session in particular, and I'm trying to get my Insta game going during the interim to post timely, relevant information to you in a social media context about opportunities. Sorry, I got distracted for a second. Opportunities to engage in the legislative process. So those are a few new things that you can look to as a guide. And then some of you may still be sort of grappling with the results of the 2023 legislative session. Hopefully you've seen these last two bullets, which is both are WSSDA resources. One is a full education bill overview, and I'm actually going to pull this one up because when I sent it out in session, I noticed the click rate on it wasn't very steep. Which means that not a lot of folks looked at it. And so I just want to be sure you see it. Let me see, are there any faces here? Mary, can you see like a spreadsheet with like an orange bar across the top? You can't. Okay. That means I'm sharing the wrong screen. So I'm going to Open that and now share this screen. Sherry, can you now see it? Or it's not Sherry, Mary, Mary, Sherry. Okay, great. So this document is also linked in the PowerPoint presentation. Why you might find it helpful is that it's organized by a couple different elements. Most specifically at the top, I've listed the bills that were passed during this last legislative session that have direct district impact and specific requirements, either for school boards or for your superintendent or for your district, that will require you to have some kind of input and engagement. I provide a link that you can find that bill, the final bill version, directly, an overview of what the bill does. If it's highlighted in green here in the timeline, it means that it is required for implementation starting with your next school year. So you will be seeing model policies come out if you haven't already on these over the course of the next couple months, because they're the most highly elevated requirements because you have to do them sooner rather than later. I did see in this last legislative session a concerted effort by legislators to put dates on implementation 1 to 2 to 3 years down the road, knowing that you need time to scale up. That didn't happen in all situations, but I saw it more frequently this last session. So hopefully that'll be an ongoing practice that we can certainly advocate for. So just note the green is something to pay attention to sooner rather than later. If there was funding allocated, I put the funding amount there for the biennium. If there was a curriculum related requirement, I indicated as such. In most cases, it was a not applicable. Whether or not there were any kind of reporting requirements, most often that's directly from your school district to OSPI, especially if there's a funding mechanism going on, and then any other relevant resources. So if there's a final bill report, fiscal note, a work group report, other types of resources that are available, I also included in the resources list. So I'd encourage you to peruse this. If you haven't already, feel free to share it. It's a nice little resource to kind of see which bills passed the session that most specifically impact K-12. Great. And then, pull that presentation back up, play from current slide. And then the 2023 legislative session presentation is one that I did with this group, I think back in April, as well as during a LegRep network meeting on those Thursday noon calls, and have posted on the website, but it's here also and just gives a high level overview and maybe a little bit more detail even than that about where we landed. So where things landed in terms of the budget, the policies, how WSSDA weighed in. So a helpful tool if you haven't reviewed it already. And then this document here links to a very comprehensive overview of all the bills that passed the legislative session. If you are having a hard time going to sleep and you really need something to entertain yourself, this would be the document to do that. However, if you're most interested in the education related bills, they're listed here in this pages 39 through 44. Helpful tool that just came out actually last week. So a few things that would be helpful for me to know is what is most helpful for you as a LegRep, or even just as a school board member, either from your own community, other organizations, or for WSSDA that help you during this time of year to effectively engage. And then what do you wish you had? Is there anything that you don't have access to or you wish you had that would enable you to engage more readily? I would love to know that, and I'm going to give an opportunity. If you don't feel comfortable speaking in front of the group, or maybe you're driving. If you're driving, don't put anything in the chat, please. You can send me an email at a later date or give me a jingle. But if you just cooking dinner and you don't want the screen on, feel free to type anything in the chat as it relates to what are you already using that's helpful, that's already developed and you have access to, or what do you wish you had that would be even more helpful for you to engage in the advocacy process. So anybody have any reflections just right off the top of their head that they'd like to volunteer? Sherry says about terminology like regionalization. Yep, that's great. I have a basic legislative terminology dictionary, but it doesn't get broken down into stuff that impacts us the most. So I think that's a great idea. Thanks, Sherry. I'm writing it down. Other ideas? While I'm doing a little wait time, I will upload the PowerPoint into the chat. Mary, break it down to relate to education. Mary, could you either speak to or type to what you mean by it? Break the terminology down. Is that what you mean? Yes, the terminology. Okay, great. That makes sense. Anita, similar help with funding terms, SPED, cap, multiplier. Yeah, all that makes sense. SPED, cap, multiplier. Yeah, I wish somebody would have had some of that for me when I started this work too. It was very helpful. Keep thinking, keep typing. I'm looking for the PowerPoint presentation to upload into the chat for you. Okay, there it is. Sherry,
Alexa, lights on.
Sherry, did you have something that you wanted to share?
I found it really helpful, and my county we're falling a little bit off the bandwagon, but we would meet like 3 or 4, our districts would all meet monthly or every couple months, just to kind of see where we were all at. And then we were only able to do this one year where we all got together. It was South Whidbey, Oak Harbor, Camano, Stanwood, Camano, and then Coopville, where we would kind of consolidate our time with our reps and our senators, which they seem to appreciate. But just getting together and having that conversation of just the ledge reps from each of the school boards. Everyone's really busy. I don't think it was ever convenient for everybody all at one time, but we managed to do it and just had some really good conversations. And I'm hoping that we can ramp that back up again.
Yeah, that's great. Who initiated those generally?
It was Eric Mann out of Oak Harbor, who unfortunately has left. So we just need to rally and get back together again, because we all loved it when we were together. It was just making it work.
That guy left us for Hawaii.
I know.
I can't imagine. It's a great idea. I love that, and is totally replicable. Worth us exploring how school districts do that and what's worked for them. So thanks for that idea. Okay, in the interest of time, I'm gonna go back to the PowerPoint because there are a few things I want to let you know are upcoming. I did upload the PowerPoint into the chat, so you can download it there. I will also send it out to the full group list in case it's difficult for you to download from chat for any reason. So get back to the presentation, play from current slide. Look ahead. All right, a couple things coming up as it relates to WSSDA specifically. So every year we have General Assembly. That's where school boards have the opportunity to vote on their position proposals, either moving them forward or keeping them from moving forward with a pro or con vote. All the position proposals that came through the position window will be in the General Assembly. As well as the opportunity to potentially amend those proposals during General Assembly. We haven't done that for the last couple of years in a virtual format. However, this year we will have both in person and a virtual option. So we'll be going hybrid this year based on a lot of requests from school board members wanting to be back together in person. The in-person element of the meeting will be in Spokane. Any school board member can attend. There can still only be one voting delegate who votes on proposals, and that voting delegate could join us in person or virtually. Everybody will have the opportunity, any school board member will have the opportunity to attend virtually from anywhere they sit for free. If anybody wants to attend the in-person, there will be a cost, which we have to have in order to pay for the hotel and the food, etc. It's a nominal cost. I'm estimating somewhere between 200 and 250, somewhere in that range will be the cost per person to attend the in-person General Assembly. Anybody attending virtually will be able to do so for free. And that's really an effort to ensure that all school boards have the opportunity to weigh in on our positions. Many have said in the past they weren't able to attend General Assembly just simply due to the cost of travel. So tried to eliminate that as a barrier. A lot of you have your superintendents, community members can listen in. Anybody can listen in, but only a school board member can vote on the positions that come forward. And like I said already, there only can be one voting delegate per school board at a time. You could have all 5 of your school board members take the voting delegate role. Let's say there's 40 positions that are in the handbook. You could divide those by 5. Each of you take 8. Position number 1 takes position 1 through 8 and then signs off. And then the next person comes in for position 9 and goes through that following. So anyway, there's lots of ways you can divide this responsibility. So it's not just one, but it also can just be one voting delegate. The point is only one school board representative at a time voting on behalf of your school board. And even though the General Assembly handbook won't be out until August 15th, which is 30 days before the General Assembly, which is part of our bylaws requirement, you can get prepared in a lot of ways by reading our existing position platform. So we have 217 existing positions. In order for you to really be informed voting for or against position proposals, it's important for you to know what positions we already have adopted by membership. Oftentimes new positions are brought forward that can be duplicative, or maybe they're better in some ways, or maybe they're missing something. And all that should be part of your consideration, your board's consideration, as you weigh in during the General Assembly in September. Please let me know if you have any questions about that. There's still a lot of details to be ironed out. Registration won't open until I think July 1st is the date we tentatively have planned. So don't worry, you haven't missed any registration options yet. We're still building that for you. And there will be options, like I said, for you to indicate whether you'll be the voting delegate, yes or no, and whether you'll be joining in person, yes or no, or one or the other. So you get my point. Another important thing coming up is our annual conference. We'll see many of you there, have seen many of you there. If you click on this link, it'll take you directly to the webpage. I wanted to let you know that this year we'll have our first Strategic Advocacy Academy, easier to say Strat Academy, where we'll spend a solid 5 to 6 hours really helping with skill building for advocacy, not just for the 2024 legislative session, but just for advocacy year round anyway. So hoping that there will be lead trips there and new school board members, and it'll be a great opportunity to break down some barriers and get comfortable and confident doing the advocacy work that we need to move our positions and priorities forward. We'll also have our standard sessions. We'll have one on just preparing for the 2024 legislative session. I may have some legislators join me. The timing is always challenging because they typically have their own assembly days at the same time we have our annual conference. So even if we invite them, they just can't be in 2 places at once. And so that makes it really hard to get representation there from our legislators. So we'll try to bring in as many voices so you can get some perspective beyond just from me and Mike Hoover, who is our advocacy consultant, working closely with WSSDA. And then my hope is to have like a Ledge Rep networking hour where it's a little more informal and we can share some ideas and thoughts. Unfortunately, all the meeting spaces are taken, so we can't do a breakfast or anything like that. So it would probably be a breakout session, and would definitely entertain any ideas or input you have to me to make that time and space the most useful to you. So the details, again, yet to be ironed out, and you can help to shape them with your feedback. If your fellow school board, anybody in your school district has something excellent to share, a practice, a policy, a collection of policies, concepts, that you would like to present to your fellow school board members at annual conference, there's still an opportunity to submit a proposal. That opportunity ends tomorrow, so it's a quick turnaround. But I've been hearing about a lot of school boards who did submit a proposal. And it's always great to hear from one another about what's working in your school districts. I also know at annual conference this year on Saturday specifically, there will be a small schools session track. So there will be multiple sessions designed for the purpose of supporting and helping small school districts in particular. Probably would be helpful to other school districts in some ways too, but we definitely heard small districts wanted something specifically. Sherry wanted to know if the Stratum Academy will be held virtually. I think I recall that the pre-conferences are only held in person. So I imagine this year Strat Academy will be an in-person only option. And it will be just before it gets underway in Bellevue, same location. Trish asks if flights are the only thing covered in the registration fee for General Assembly. So registration fee for General Assembly would cover space, Wi-Fi, and meals. Your district or you would be on the hook for getting there and staying there. Typically, we start on Friday around 10 and close on Saturday around 3 or 4. So the aim or goal would be that hopefully people could fly in on Friday morning and fly out on Saturday night, only requiring a single night stay. That's the design. And you know, but it's way too soon to tell everything or read all the tea leaves, but some things we do know is that it always starts, ledge session always starts the second Monday of the year, so January 8th next year. We call it a supplemental or a short session, but as Mary alluded to early on in this conversation, it will be robust, fast, lots of content. In some ways it's harder than a long session because you don't have as much time to breathe. So you really got to be on it. And I have to rely on my fellow school board members also to help me with testimony, again, because I can't be in multiple places at the same time. And it's helpful to have a distributive leadership model as it relates to communicating with legislators and testifying during session, which you'll still be able to do remotely as you were this last year. Any bill that was introduced in the last session that didn't pass this session is possibly up for reconsideration. And we will see some bills that didn't pass this session come back. Some of the bills that I think in particular will return, probably Parent Bill of Rights, curriculum and instruction requirements, isolation and restraint considerations. I am not hearing right now about transition to kindergarten coming back for reconsideration since they landed on a final decision about that, but I'll let you know if I hear something to the contrary. That was the last bill before they closed in regular session that they were able to pass. So, you know, I think there will be some issues that for WSSDA membership, we have WSSDA membership who span the spectrum of perspective on a lot of these issues. And so it will be really important for our members to show up during General Assembly, weigh in to make sure we have clear positions that give guidance to how WSSDA as an organization will weigh in during the session on some really key and important issues to all of you, but for different reasons. The majority will remain in both the House and the Senate, no elections for our legislators this year. However, there are some leadership changes with House Republicans, specifically TJ Wilcox stepped down. Drew Stokesbury was elected to step in as the majority leader on the House side. So with that, there will be some structural practice changes for House Republicans in particular. For the most part, other than that, however, most committee and House and Senate leadership will stay pretty much the same, which is typical in the second year of a biennium. I think we're pretty close to running out of time, but I can't see my clock anymore. We are past time. My apologies for keeping you a minute longer than we planned. But I would love to hear from you either now, if you have a few minutes to spare, or via email, if your board's already having conversations about what your priorities are for next session. If you just want to sprinkle some of that into the chat, that would be super helpful for me. I've heard from school districts already that a solve for regionalization is going to be a huge priority, understandably so. Hold on, let me save this and close that so I can see your faces. Regionalization, hope to come back to the continued conversation around special ed. I will tell you, I would be doubtful that additional funding for special ed in this next biennium would come forward, most specifically because there was such a robust conversation around it in this last legislative session. Many legislators felt they gave a significant amount to special education, recognizing there may still be gaps. But oftentimes they will say things such as, we enact a new policy. In this case, it'll be a change of the multiplier in statute. We want to see this policy play out before we make any additional changes. So I would be surprised if we grapple with the multiplier anymore. Perhaps there will be a discussion about the cap, but again, my guess is that some of the attention will shift to transportation funding, because both Monica Stonier and Lisa Wellman, both leaders on the House and the Senate side, are pretty passionate about seeing a fix for transportation funding. And really, there wasn't much movement in this last legislative session. So if there were a big money issue to be discussed during a supplemental session, which is rare, I think transportation would probably come before special ed at this point in time. But typically they don't mess with the budget in the supplemental year, because the budget was established really in the first year of the biennium, and the second year is considered a year to tweak things, make some slight but not significant changes. Sherry says supermajority to simple majority, absolutely. Already hearing from legislators that they plan on bringing that bill back. A tough bill, a big bill to pass in a 60-day session. But I think we're gonna, especially since the last election cycle, we saw, I think 4 of the 5 school districts unsuccessfully pass their bond between the 50 and 60%. It's more data to show evidence as to how we need to be helping our schools with the simple majority. So I think we'll see a couple legislators bring that back. And I think there will be conversation around 55% as opposed to the true simple majority. And WSSDA always has a tough time with that, because our current position proposal says simple majority, which means 50% plus 1. But 55% would get more schools more access. So it's an interesting conversation for us to have. I'm just checking a few of the questions here. So Anita asked, will WSSDA hire a new student rep coordinator since Logan's leaving? Logan will be staying on contract with us to help with the student rep network through the end of this calendar year, during which time we will assess the workload. We will assess his continued interest, and we will also assess if in the 2024 legislative session a student representative bill is brought forward and any funding might be paired with it, and how that might inform some of our personnel decision making in the future. If you remember, Representative Berquist filed a bill on student advisory and student leadership, and the student rep network was specifically named in that bill. That bill didn't progress this session, so I imagine that'll be another one that'll come back. So we're looking into it and making sure that our student reps are supported and prioritized is clearly a need and an interest of our members. So we will do everything we can to keep that trajectory moving forward. And I will make sure to thank Logan on your behalf. Thank you so much for being here. I will get out that PowerPoint presentation. We'll post the recording, and know that you don't have to wait until next month's meeting to ask questions or reach out. I'm here anytime.